The federal forces deployed into the Tampa Bay residential area, in a coordinated formation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Homeland Security, targeting the private residence of a gubernatorial candidate once considered a gold standard symbol of Florida politics. The search warrant was activated the moment the assault teams reached the front door. The steel frame of the door was breached in a single synchronized blast, allowing the teams to flood in through 2 points of pressure, securing the central lobby, staircase, and first-floor corridors in short order. During the inspection of the adjacent rooms, the Special Task Force discovered a hidden vault reinforced with heavy-duty metal supports. Inside, the amount of seized narcotics far exceeded all initial estimates. 400 pounds of fentanyl packed in technical barrels, 160 pounds of methamphetamine sealed in batches, along with several vacuum-sealed bundles of cash totaling millions of dollars. The structure of the vault suggested a professional level of investment, not the makeshift hiding spots used by small-time criminal groups. Right against the opposite wall was a weapons rack containing 54 tactical rifles, modified handguns, and compact automatic firing devices, weaponry typically used in cartel enforcement operations, not found in the hands of a politician. All weapons had their mechanisms modified, integrated with specialized attachments, and optimized for close quarters combat. These details confirmed that this was an arms cache intended for organized criminal activity, not random evidence. The linchpin of the raid was found on the kitchen counter, where an unlocked phone was still displaying an encrypted communication chain with the Juarez cartel. The data on the screen fully revealed the transport routes, recipient lists, transit warehouse codes, and political protection terms spanning 15 years. There were no signs of coercion or blackmail. The content of the exchanges showed systematic, proactive coordination managed under a two-way pipeline model. The cartel provided finance and logistical support, while the politician ensured legal cover and risk dispersion. When the search expanded to the private office, agents found the electronic data storage unit used as the coordination center. 2 encrypted hard drives contained the transportation plan blueprint, offshore account lists, and distribution diagrams that showed a deep understanding of criminal operational structures. Internal campaign documents were filed alongside ledgers related to previous shipments, clearly showing how he used the political machine as a front. The entire process of securing the house was swift, thanks to the tactic of splitting floors and blocking escape routes. There were no signs of significant resistance, but the volume of evidence seized created an impact far beyond the scope of the raid. Technical units proceeded to seal off each area, collect samples, encrypt data drives, and log the chain of custody to prepare for the extended investigation. Immediately after the initial sweep was completed, the operation commander determined that the case was no longer just about common narcotics possession and trafficking. This was a critical link in the cartel's protracted patronage mechanism, where a politically influential figure provided a layer of cover that law enforcement had never accurately assessed. The residence of a gubernatorial candidate had become a staging ground for poisons capable of widespread disaster, coupled with weaponry and internal documents only found in transnational criminal organizations. The initial hours of the operation raised bigger questions about the structure of manipulated power and the extent of cartel infiltration into the political system. Seizing the evidence was just the beginning. The aftershock spread faster than the federal deployment. This was no longer an isolated case. It was a signal that Florida had been attacked from within its own structure. The personnel file and financial flow of Marcus Dillon Whitford were quickly expanded from the state to the federal level. For over a decade, Whitford had appeared as the model reforming businessman entering politics, praised by many media outlets as the representative of a new leadership style, younger, more dynamic, associated with campaigns promising financial transparency and modernizing governance. His public appearances were frequent, each one carrying a message criticizing strict border policies and asserting the need for a more humane approach. All of it created a perfect facade, masking the true source of the power he wielded. When investigators began a deep dive into Whitford's business entities, the murky structure became clear. 27 consulting firms registered in various counties, 3 real estate funds that owned no physical assets, and 11 charities with absolutely no community activities. All shared a common pattern: phantom personnel, unsubstantiated capital, tax filings submitted regularly but reflecting no real business operations, This was a network of shell companies deliberately designed to create conduits for cartel money to enter the legitimate financial system undetected. When Whitford's bank accounts were cross-referenced with the Juarez cartel's shipping records, a cyclical pattern of matching transactions emerged. Starting from small deposits roughly 20 years ago, the cash flow steadily increased to six-figure transactions, routed through Panama, Belize, and the Cayman Islands before returning as private donor investments. This left no clear tax discrepancies thanks to the sophisticated paperwork of the shell corporations. Investigators concluded this was a multi-layered money laundering mechanism, operating with near absolute precision. Documents extracted from the personal computer and mobile devices seized at the scene showed that the coordination between Whitford and the cartel was not limited to finance. Encrypted files recorded the membership list of a criminal group consisting of individuals who had previously escaped from Venezuelan prison camps, brought into Florida via secret maritime routes. This group was responsible for nearly 2,900 shipments of narcotics and weapons over the 15 years. Whitford acted as a coordinating intermediary, providing safe schedules, funding warehousing, and ensuring no inspections at critical checkpoints. Whitford's motive did not stem from threat or compulsion. The communication data clearly demonstrated a symbiotic relationship. The cartel provided finance and manpower, and Whitford provided political power, legal shielding, and the ability to manipulate administrative procedures. This was not a case of an individual being roped in. This was a proactive collaboration, beginning when he was just a businessman seeking capital and extending to his becoming a gubernatorial candidate in one of America's most critical states. During his political rise, Whitford built an image as a public finance reformer, while the investigative documents showed he was the architect of the most complex money laundering network ever discovered in Florida. Speeches about budget transparency became a tool to distract the public, while the shell company system continued to expand to accommodate the cartel's growing profits. When international shipping data was cross-referenced with Whitford's work schedule, numerous investor meetings coincided with the time containers carrying cash and processing agents mixed into industrial shipments arrived at the ports. In internal meetings, Whitford described himself as a bridge protecting operations, a cartel internal term for the figure providing the political shield. This showed his full awareness of his role. Not a deceived accomplice, but an active member of the criminal structure. Notably, this operating system not only helped the cartel sustain its activities, it also gave Whitford a platform of power that the voters never saw. As this evidence was uncovered, the image of a candidate once seen as the safe, visionary choice was completely reversed. The layers of polish built up over decades revealed their true nature. A politician using the democratic process as a tool serving a transnational criminal organization. The investigation into Whitford's personal background and finances concluded with a single finding. He was not the victim of the cartel, but a critical link in their infiltration of Florida's political system. This was the foundation leading to far more serious discoveries and the source of data that guided federal forces to the hidden fortress deep in the Everglades. The decryption of hard drives and electronic devices seized from Marcus Dillon Whitford's residence led the investigation to coordinates deep in the Everglades, far from residential areas and completely lacking in connective infrastructure. Initially, analysts believed this was merely a temporary supply point or warehouse. However, transmission data, power consumption, and strange telecommunication signals appearing late at night suggested a far greater operational scale than a typical transit facility. When satellite systems and surveillance drones were deployed, the true nature of the location became clear. A facility built like a military-style base disguised in the swamp. From the air, the area looked only like scattered tin roofs amidst dense vegetation. But infrared and canopy-penetrating radar imagery revealed a completely different underlying structure. The thick, multi-layered steel perimeter walls extended in a closed hexagonal shape. 4 watchtowers were placed at the corners, equipped with military-grade long-range and thermal observation devices. A patrol road running around the area was designed for continuous armored vehicle movement without creating blind spots. The most concerning part was the radar system continuously scanning over 120 miles around. This wasn't commercial equipment. It was a modified maritime technology, powerful enough to detect boats, low-flying helicopters, and abnormal movements in the swamp. The cartel's possession and operation of such a system within U.S. territory confirmed that the level of infiltration was no longer limited to economic crime or drug distribution. This was a structure with a defensive nature equivalent to an operational outpost. As infrared drones scanned deeper into the central area, two distinct structural layers became visible. The upper layer consisted of a workshop system, supply depots, an armored vehicle parking lot, and a fuel storage area. The lower layer, covered by a double roof and thermal camouflage, was the chemical processing zone. Two wide, assembly line configured industrial floors were used for the production of fentanyl and methamphetamine on a scale comparable to overseas facilities. The equipment was smuggled from various sources, configured to hazmat standards, and operated continuously. Thermal data also indicated the presence of 60 armed individuals inside. Each group was allocated by sector, carrying weapons capable of operating in confined spaces, using encrypted radio, and operating on a heavy guard schedule. This was not a loose criminal group. Their movement, squad division, and alarm mechanism reflected well-trained procedures, unified command, and contingency plans for attack scenarios. Additionally, information gathered from Whitford's data indicated that several missing victims had been brought to this facility. Surveillance results confirmed that 42 individuals were detained and forced to participate in the production of the toxic drugs. The hostages came from 9 different countries, including 6 U.S. citizens who had been reported missing for months. Living conditions were tightly controlled, with no access to information or movement, and they were divided into groups to limit the possibility of resistance. This evidence pointed to a multi-tiered operational mechanism. The outer layer was for defense, the middle for coordination, and the inner layer for production and detention. There was no way to enter or exit the facility without passing multiple checkpoints. This indicated that the fortress was not only used for manufacturing but also served as the command center for the Juarez network in Florida. Security analysts concluded that this was the first time a cartel had built a facility on U.S. territory comparable in scale to a military camp. Its existence reflected a level of penetration that far exceeded previous estimates by law enforcement. There was no longer any doubt that the Everglades Fortress was the network's central point for command, production, training, and distribution, protected by organized, paramilitary standard armed forces. All the data collected established an undeniable truth. To neutralize the Whitford and Juarez cartel network, it was impossible to merely seize finances or arrest individual transport groups. To end this threat, they had to strike the very center of their operation, the Everglades Fortress, the place that dictated the rhythm of the entire network. The scale and military nature of the Everglades Fortress forced the federal government to activate the highest level of intervention. In Washington, an emergency session was convened after satellite data and documents from Marcus Dillon Whitford's devices were verified. Representatives from the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Drug Enforcement Administration, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and liaisons from the U.S. Special Operations Command attended to finalize the course of action. The objective was clearly defined: neutralize the Juarez Cartel Command Center and rescue the 42 hostages before they could be moved or executed. The operational plan was divided into 3 key focuses: covert approach, blinding the warning system, and multi-directional assault. The main force was assigned to the FBI's hostage rescue team and the tactical unit from DHS, combined with specialized electronic warfare teams. Due to the complex swamp environment, the command group decided to use low-flying Black Hawk helicopters, along with ground advancement routes along water channels to limit detection. At 3:18 a.m., 2 Black Hawk helicopters departed the staging area, flying close to the water surface to utilize radar shadow. In the swamp area, the ground teams began their march in knee-deep water, using night vision equipment to follow the route entirely obscured by dense vegetation. Each team was assigned to approach one of 3 directions to lock down the entire outer perimeter of the fortress. The initial phase was executed by the electronic warfare unit. When the distance was less than 1,000 meters, high-powered jamming equipment was activated. Immediately, the fortress's radar and communication systems were cut, rendering the watchtowers unable to issue an alarm. The cartel's radio control signals were simultaneously neutralized, inadvertently allowing the special forces to shorten the approach time without being detected. As the defensive system was blinded, the operation commander ordered the start of the assault phase. At 3:29 a.m., breaching teams simultaneously ignited small charges of shaped explosives on 2 sections of the north and east walls. The blast deformed the reinforced steel structure, creating openings wide enough for the formations to enter. The moment the walls burst open, the cartel forces reacted by concentrating fire on the breach points. But the federal teams managed to take cover and isolate the lines of fire. An armored vehicle belonging to the cartel attempted to charge the breakthrough point to block the advance. The ATF forces waited for the right moment, deploying light anti-armor equipment to disable the engine, causing the vehicle to stop in the courtyard. The cabin was engulfed in smoke from the burning engine, eliminating a key threat in the early stages of the engagement. Meanwhile, the assault team split into small wedges, moving through the maze-like corridors and workshops. Control of the tight spaces was achieved through tactics of cutting corners, clearing rooms, and locking down areas in stages. Commands were short, focused on coordination, ensuring no blind spots were left unsearched. The cartel's mercenary groups attempted to rally forces in the production area to organize a defense but were driven onto the defensive as the federal assault line continuously pushed deep toward the center. At 3:41 a.m., the first chemical processing floor was completely secured. 3 minutes later, the second workshop fell to the special forces. The remaining individuals converged toward the southwest exit to organize a final resistance. But pressure from multiple directions quickly broke their formation. When this area was locked down, the rescue teams immediately entered the detention area. The hostages were found in a state of exhaustion but were responsive upon seeing the federal forces. Tactical medical personnel immediately assessed, stabilized, and moved them to a safe area. Once the fortress was comprehensively secured, the collection of evidence began. The amount of narcotics, weapons, and seized assets showed the cartel's operational scale far exceeded initial assessments. The assault took 23 minutes, enough time to dismantle the most critical command center of the network that Whitford had protected for years. This was just the opening step for a much larger sweep phase. As data from the scene indicated, the cartel's network extended across the entire state. Immediately after the Everglades fortress was secured, technical units began decrypting data seized from the cartel's phones, computers, hard drives, and communication devices. Within hours, a map emerged with a dense concentration of markers stretching from the Gulf of Mexico coast to the Atlantic shore. Each symbol was a safe house, a storage depot, a drop-off point, or a coordination center scattered throughout Florida. This information confirmed that the fortress was not the final destination but the hub of a multi-layered network spanning the entire state. The appearance of the map system forced the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI to expand the scale of the operation. A quick decision was issued. Activate Operation Sunfall, a wide area sweep involving simultaneous participation from federal forces, state police, local police departments, and the Florida Department of Transportation. The critical goal was to block all escape routes for the remaining individuals before they could leave the state or destroy documents. The first phase of the operation focused on the Gulf Coast region. In Sarasota, a beachfront apartment was identified as the storage site for financial records and accounting data related to the money laundering operation. The assault team approached at 6:14 a.m., breached the door, and subdued 2 individuals attempting to burn ledgers along with $4,700,000 wrapped in thermal insulation plastic. All storage devices were seized and sealed for further analysis. About an hour later, in Lakeland, 3 cartel vehicles left a warehouse and sped toward the interstate highway. The Florida Highway Patrol surveillance system immediately identified license plates linked to 3 previous smuggling incidents. As the convoy attempted to bypass the Interstate 4 route, a state police team deployed spike strips to force the vehicles to slow down, while DHS special units closed in from both sides. Armed suspects opened fire in an attempt to break the perimeter, forcing law enforcement to return controlled fire. The confrontation took place in a citrus grove and ended when 6 suspects were subdued, along with multiple crates of marked ammunition destined for distribution. By mid-morning, the operation expanded northward. In Gainesville, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, raided a machine shop long suspected of converting civilian firearms into automatic weapons. During the raid, forces seized 39 modified guns, several suppressors, and a Colombian technician who confessed to training Whitford's paramilitary forces. This discovery demonstrated the professional level of the weapon support system the cartel had established. In Fort Lauderdale, a warehouse disguised as a small transportation facility was found operating as a mobile fentanyl lab. The equipment was still warm, indicating the production line had just been active. Two masked suspects barricaded themselves behind chemical mixing tanks, using metal barriers as shields. The assault team was forced to use a flash charge to break the defense. Upon reaching the central area, the forces secured all equipment, seizing chemicals, raw materials, and formula data. The most unusual case occurred near Orlando, where a figure identified as the cartel's regional commander attempted to escape by boat through a chain of natural lakes. A surveillance helicopter complex spotted the boat moving erratically through the thin fog, heading toward a junction where a network of canals connected to the northern escape route. A DHS high-speed boat team was deployed. The chase lasted 14 minutes, ending when the airboat intercepted and forced the suspect to surrender. He was carrying a fake passport, encrypted keys, and a list of local officials who had received support from Whitford. By the end of the initial phase of Operation Sunfall, 79 individuals were arrested, multiple warehouses were sealed, and key cartel operations were dismantled. The volume of information collected from the sweep created the largest database ever recorded related to the Juarez network in Florida. This was the fastest collapse of a statewide criminal structure in years, yet it was only the beginning of a much more complex political and legal investigation ahead. Immediately after the entire central area of the Everglades fortress was secured, federal forces began sweeping the perimeter to ensure no potential threats remained. However, data from the thermal observation equipment showed an anomaly on the southern edge of the complex. A low, windowless structure, partially submerged in the swamp mud. Its construction was completely different from the other buildings, suggesting it might be an area for specialized units or contain highly protected individuals. Immediate access was ordered to prevent any risk from remaining cartel forces. As the team approached, the front of the structure remained quiet, showing no signs of activity. However, thermal sensors continued to identify movement inside. The initial assessment was that a remaining cartel group might be preparing to destroy evidence or find an escape route using an underground passage. To minimize risk to personnel and hostages, the operation commander ordered a two-pronged suppression formation to lock down all potential escape paths. When the distance between the two sides was less than 20 meters, a steel door unexpectedly slid sideways, revealing a narrow path leading to the back of the building. Immediately after, a burst of automatic fire erupted, forcing federal forces to immediately seek cover and organize a controlled counterattack. The remaining cartel members used the narrow terrain and the darkness to their advantage, proving that this escape plan was pre-planned and not an improvised reaction. However, the element of surprise did not last. The DHS tactical team quickly expanded the perimeter, splitting into two groups to approach from both sides of the building to cut off all movement directions. Another group deployed to the rear to prevent suspects from reaching a disguised dock leading into the swamp's canal network. This location was assessed as the last retreat line the cartel might use if the fortress were attacked, so being blocked here left them with no options. On the main front, federal forces carried out suppression using controlled fire, pinning the group of suspects into the narrow space right outside the annex door. As the distance narrowed, two flash rounds were fired into the exit area. The intense light disoriented the suspects for a few seconds, allowing the assault team to surge forward, lock down the corner, and force them back inside. Those who attempted to break the perimeter were subdued instantly, preventing any risk of escalation. Once the formation had the advantage, the order to enter was deployed. The space inside the annex consisted of a hallway leading to two large rooms, one of which had been converted into a storage area for high-value tactical equipment and weapons. Multiple crates of ammunition, communication controllers, and unreleased encryption devices were seized on site. The barricaded suspects were systematically neutralized according to standard protocol, ensuring no further damage was incurred. The entire engagement ended in just 90 seconds from the moment the steel door opened. Once the shooting stopped, security teams immediately swept the area for any unidentified tunnels, caches, or triggering devices. The structure was sealed and handed over to the technical team to process data and valuable evidence. The rest of the main complex was officially declared secure shortly after the final report was sent to the command center. A silence descended over the swamp area after the fighting ended, completely contrasting with the intensity of the minutes before. Smoke from small fires still lingered, but medical teams quickly moved in, triaging the hostages' injuries and stabilizing the condition of agents affected during the assault. This was the time to assess damage. consolidate the scene, and ensure that all traces of criminal activity at the Everglades fortress were preserved for the investigation. Although the battle at the annex ended all organized cartel resistance within the fortress, its repercussions did not stop at this location. The evidence seized here, from communication equipment, encrypted documents, to operational ledgers, will open a deeper layer of investigation, including the individuals and organizations that provided logistics, financial aid, or leveraged power to protect the criminal network. The Everglades assault may have concluded, but its impact is only beginning to spread. As soon as the comprehensive report from the Everglades fortress was transferred to Tallahassee and Washington, the Florida political system plunged into unprecedented chaos. The fact that a gubernatorial candidate once seen as a symbol of reform was actually a key link in the Juarez cartel cast doubt on the credibility of many public agencies. Crowds gathered in front of the state capitol building, all carrying the same question. How could a figure like Marcus Dillon Whitford operate a transnational criminal network for 15 years without being detected? Federal investigators immediately broadened the scope of the inquiry beyond the fortress, focusing on organizations and individuals directly linked to Whitford's shell companies. 31 businessmen, local officials, and political donors were placed on a special list. Financial records showed that many of them had signed off on strategic investments that coincided with the cartel's major transportation operations. In some cases, the permitting process for warehouses or transport hubs was approved in just a few days, despite the applications lacking many mandatory items. 3 police departments in 3 different counties launched internal investigations after traffic reports showed that routine inspections of cartel-linked vehicles were canceled without specific reason. A former police chief admitted he had received consulting fees from a charity linked to Whitford, and these payments doubled whenever the cartel's transport routes passed through his jurisdiction. These testimonies showed that the extent of cartel infiltration into public agencies was far deeper than initially assessed. Meanwhile, the reaction of the Florida populace demonstrated a clear breakdown of trust. At community meetings, elderly residents stood up to question the protection capabilities of the system they once believed in. The fact that a politician stood before the public with a respectable image while secretly helping bring tons of toxic chemicals into the state fueled widespread anger. Civil organizations and anti-drug advocacy groups demanded a comprehensive review, not only of suspected officials but also of all procedures for certification, oversight, and inspection of transport assets. However, amidst the lingering instability, the rescue of the 42 hostages at the Everglades fortress became a rare bright spot. Their stories of survival, forced to work in toxic conditions, guarded by paramilitary forces, and completely isolated from the outside world, underscored the urgency of the operation. Many of them only realized they were on U.S. territory when they saw the federal forces' patches during the rescue. These accounts bolstered the belief that the raid was not just about dismantling a drug production facility, but a necessary action to save lives and restore order. The incident's impact spread beyond Florida. Legislative bodies in many other states began reviewing regulations related to political funding, candidate asset transparency, and mechanisms for vetting the sources of charitable funds. Many experts noted that this would be a major turning point in how the U.S. confronts the infiltration of transnational criminal organizations into the political system. The downfall of Marcus Dillon Whitford proved that the threat does not only come from the border or the sea. It can appear behind a suit jacket, in speeches reassuring voters, and in glossy campaign materials. But this story also shows that the coordination between law enforcement, intelligence data, and a strong public reaction is still enough to bring down a network that seemed impenetrable. This is a reminder that accountability and integrity are not just slogans, they are the only shield protecting the community from forces willing to trade human lives for power and profit.